Hey guys, Happy New Year. It's been a while since I've made a video for this YouTube channel. I made an update video a while ago, maybe 2 months or so, when I said that I wanted to update my YouTube and kind of do more videos and content like that. And the past 2 months has been fairly chaotic, and I've moved across the country and I'm no longer living where I was, so little personal things got in the way and I just basically haven't done anything on my YouTube channel. I am still working the Old Boy review video essay thing that I mentioned before. I've got a script ready and I've already edited part of that, so I need to put that together and create that. So this is just going to be a video containing my opinions of the films that I saw last year over the course of the year. There are 79 films here, which isn't a lot, and I will say that the way I've done this is that these are all the films that I've seen for the first time last year. So these films didn't necessarily all come out during 2019 to 2020, quite a lot of them haven't. And we'll kick off with the first one that I saw last January, which was The Favourite, Yorgos Lanthimos' film. The Favourite is terrific. I really enjoyed my time with it. Lanthimos is a very interesting filmmaker, and I've liked several of his films before. The performances in it are excellent. The cinematography is incredible. The one thing I didn't like about the cinematography necessarily was the incredibly wide fisheye lens angles. I know that was done as a stylistic point of view and perspective, but it took me out of the film a little, rather than keep me in the kind of place that the film was. Obviously it was shot around some country homes in England, and it's shot incredibly well. Some of the scenes reminded me of Barry Lyndon, the way that that's shot, especially with the candlelight sequences and things like that, and it's just a terrific narrative. And of course Olivia Colman was incredible. I think it came out in 2018 in the States for the Oscar seasoning, but it's just a really good film and I'd highly recommend you go and check it out.
If you do not go, I will start kicking you, and I will not stop.
My dear friend, how good to see you've returned from
Hell. I'm sure you shall pass through it one day.
The next film is a film called Pornostar. This film was a 1998 film directed by Toshiaki Toyoda. He's a Japanese filmmaker I don't know much about. He's fairly modern, and I'm kind of working my way through some of his works, and Pornostar was the first one of his films that I've seen as well. I didn't know anything about the film at all before watching it. I picked it up on a release from Third Window Films, and the film's okay. It's an interesting crime kind of gangster flick set within teenage years of rebellion and youthfulness and things like that. But it's not terrifically well written, it's not very well paced, and there are some sequences in it which are really good, and others which I found myself very bored and slightly misdirected in the sense of where the plot and narrative was going throughout the scenes that I didn't like. I don't think it's a bad film, but I definitely don't need to watch it again. I didn't really take much away from it either, so it's an okay film, but it's not one of my favourites at all. So next up, the third film I saw this year was Legally Blonde. It's the first time I'd seen this film. It was kind of fun. I wasn't really expecting to have as much fun as I did with it, but I can't say that I'll ever watch it again or want to watch it again. It kind of ticked the boxes for what it wanted to do, and I kind of watched it in the right environment as well. And yeah, it was kind of fun. It wasn't amazing. The comedy was okay, but it's just one of those kind of redemption stories about a ditzy blonde who goes to university or college to do a degree, and she becomes a lawyer, which is why it's called Legally Blonde. The fourth film on this list is Howl's Moving Castle, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. The film really took me by surprise, and I really enjoyed it. I think this is one of the best of the Ghibli films, and I found it very enjoyable. The animation always is spectacular. The artwork within these films are always really good, but this film really popped. It's very fantastical and kind of very well within its elements. You know, different landscapes, different kind of places, which are terrifically put together, and all the characters kind of come to life. You know, there are weird creatures in this, and it doesn't feel like they are distant from the rest of the film. Their inclusion in the film makes sense. I found the narrative a really enjoyable one of Sophie, who is a young girl who gets transformed into an old lady and has to travel through the world as an older person to then break the curse and become young again. But what really shines here is when she meets Howl, and it's the kind of magic that ensues within their relationship and the friendships that they kind of make on the way. It's a really charming Studio Ghibli film, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone. Part of the narrative towards the end of the film doesn't make a terrible amount of sense, and it does feel a little bit like cliche, especially with some of the resolutions within the narrative are quite cliched, but I found myself actually really enjoying them. I didn't have a problem with them necessarily, and yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I'll definitely be watching it again. It's one of my favourite Ghibli films and is well up there with Spirited Away and Kiki's Delivery Service, which I absolutely love as well. The fifth film on the list is a film that I heard a lot about, and this is Split by M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan's an interesting director to me. I think he isn't that good as a filmmaker. You know, Sixth Sense was really fun. The twist in that film is obviously one that everybody knows by now, and when he does things right, he does them quite well. This film is okay. It's nothing more than okay. When the film initially came out, I remember seeing a lot of people on YouTube, you know, the kind of stereotypical YouTube reviewers, which were like, oh my god, James McAvoy is playing 23 different people in the new M. Night Shyamalan film, and it's not shit, so therefore it must be the best film I've ever seen. It's not that. The film is relatively interesting. You know, it's a bottle film about three girls who are kidnapped and put in a basement. James McAvoy's character, called Kevin, I think, has this split personality, and he's kind of battling within himself to kind of let them go free or kill them. I didn't think the film was shot particularly badly. I think some of the sequences are quite interesting, and the main actress, I've forgotten the name, but she was also quite good in it as well. But this is ultimately a very forgettable film for me. There isn't a lot of drive in the narrative, and the ending is very, very predictable. McAvoy does well. He definitely does well, but he isn't incredible, and it isn't like the performance of a lifetime, as a lot of people have kind of suggested. And that being said, I also haven't seen Glass, the third film in this trilogy. That is kind of came out of nowhere, and Unbreakable was made ages ago, and now Split and Glass came out. But you know, Unbreakable was an interesting film at the time when that was released, but this one I wasn't really on side with. I think it had too much hype. Too many people thought it was incredible, and it was just a very mediocre film about a kind of someone with a split personality. And actually talking about that, I don't think that there was enough development of the characters within his psyche. You have different glimpses of the different people that he's playing. You know, he dresses up as a woman, or he kind of shaves his head or has a wig or something like that, but you only get glimpses. It's almost like Shyamalan wasn't sure if the film wanted to be based around James McAvoy's character and exploring that side of things, or whether it should have been based around the three characters who were kidnapped by James McAvoy's character. And because of that kind of disruption in the narrative, and the writing especially, there isn't enough time for both things to progress at a natural pace or consistency, so it just kind of feels and falls flat. Yeah, it was okay. I won't be watching it again.
He's done awful things to people, and he'll do awful things to you.
Next up is a film called Porco Rosso. This is another Hayao Miyazaki film, another one of the Ghibli films. Again, I've picked up the steelbook and it looks incredible. This film was a massive disappointment to me. I'm just going to say that now, just for anyone who is a fan of Miyazaki films or the Ghibli works, or really likes this film. I don't think the film's bad at all, but I know that this film is very highly rated amongst the Ghibli fan base, and to me, it's a fairly boring film. Not a lot happens. The development of characters takes a while to progress, and you're just kind of put into this situation where I'm expected to really like the main character called Porco, but he doesn't really do anything or suggest any reason why one should like him. He's not a bad character. I mean, he's definitely likable, but he's not lovable, and I don't relate to him. And the kind of relationships that happen between the characters, and the kind of things that, like, oh, the bad guy's bad because of this, those kind of things just kind of fall into place, and it feels very old in its kind of values as well. Some of the sequences in this film are very, very good, but the film as a whole was kind of neutral. There wasn't much to it, and for that, it's one of my least favourite of the Ghibli films. It was okay, but there are a lot of better Ghibli works out there, and I've liked a lot of the other ones way more than this one. I'm not annoyed that I've seen it, I'm not annoyed that I own it, but I won't be jumping to see this one anytime soon. Next up, we have a Chinese film called Mountains Made Apart. This film is by filmmaker Jia Zhangke, a Chinese filmmaker, and yeah, this film blew me away, pretty much. The direction in this film is fantastic. You can really tell that Zhangke really understands how to use the camera, cinematography, the music, pacing, acting, narrative devices and dialogue and things like that. And he really has a really good understanding of how all of these things meld together and mesh to create a very interesting narrative. It takes place in 3 different periods of a woman's life, and it has been a while since I've seen it, so I can't necessarily remember the specifics of each one. But what I do remember is that whilst watching this film, I was blown away by the direction, as I've said before. everything in the film is very well made. You know, I could probably do a deconstruction or something like that after watching it again, but it's been a while. But the acting, as I've said, the cinematography, everything about the film is just like pure filmmaking goodness. I didn't have many problems with the film. I think that the pacing is a tiny bit off, and the last period of the film is also one which kind of takes me apart a bit, because it's set in 2025 and it's about kind of like in the future, and there are technologies that are being used today which are in there, and they're kind of adapted slightly, but it's not really futuristic, but almost a little bit futuristic, because the technology doesn't seem like it's so far ahead that it's unreasonable, but at the same time it just felt like something that he felt needed to be in the film, but it's not necessarily important. It's just kind of set in that surrounding. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed the film, and I thought it was terrific. The other Janker film that I've seen is A Touch of Sin, which I thought that was absolutely incredible as well. And I'm really looking forward to checking out his other film in the Arrow Academy Blu-ray box set, which those two films were part of, which is why I watched this as well. Really, really enjoyable, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone interested in Asian cinema. Next up we have Mad Max, directed by George Miller, and this is the original Mad Max. So I watched Fury Road. I don't like Fury Road, I'm one of those people, and yeah, we'll just leave it at that, because a lot of people love that film and I don't really understand why. I decided to check out the first one just to kind of see what the kind of hype was about the franchise, because a lot of people like Mad Max as a thing. I watched the first film and I don't know what I was expecting, but it feels to me like it's an incredibly low budget film, and it's not particularly good either. The kind of performances and writing is very, very campy. The action sequences in this film aren't very well directed at all. They're kind of all over the place. It feels like a 1980s, early 80s, late 70s film. I don't know when it was made, but I really didn't like it or care for it that much at all. I know Mel Gibson's in it, but it just kind of feels like a B-movie, definite B-movie kind of feel to it, Grindhouse-esque. But it's just a bit shit. I don't know what else I can say. Sorry if you like it, but I didn't grow up with it, and watching through like the lens of me sat here in 2019, it doesn't really hold up at all. I don't recommend it. Next up is a film by Danish director Thomas Vinterberg. Obviously he worked with Lars von Trier, who I also really, really love. His works on the Dogma Manifesto in the mid-90s, and this film is a film that really takes place within the manifesto being created. So the film is entirely a Dogma film. I believe this is called Dogma 1. Von Trier's film called The Idiots is Dogma 2. And obviously all the other Dogma films were named after a specific number rather than the actual title of the film. But the film in case here is called The Celebration or Festen. It is terrific. It's a really, really interesting film. It takes place on location at a kind of family manor house. It's all about a family gathering around a 60th birthday party and all the relationships that come within that as well. And it's a really, really interesting kind of dissection of family politics and feelings and kind of the conflicts involved as well. Some of the narrative sequences which are revealed later on in the films are very, very moving. These kind of tensions all come to light towards the end of the film, and this terrific climax. And as well, because it's a Dogma film, it's really inventive and playful. There are shots and the camera work in this film which kind of blew me away. You know, you've never really seen stuff like this before, and I don't think I've seen it since either. And it feels very, very experimental, sticking the camera on a pole and then bringing it into frame rather than holding the camera and making it handheld the entire time, which a lot of the Dogma films actually feel like. But I think that the techniques that are used within this film are incredible, and Thomas Vinterberg's a really good director as well. He directed the film called The Hunt with Mads Mikkelsen, and I thought that was very good as well. I just really enjoyed my time with this. It's a very interesting film. Anyone interested in filmmaking should definitely check it out, just for how it's been constructed, edited, shot. The acting in this is terrific. You know, the performances are great, the script is really good, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. So the 10th film that I saw in 2019 is Ringu, the 1998 film by Hideo Nakata, and I quite enjoyed my time with the film. It's not a bad film, it's an interesting J-horror film. It's obviously one of the ones that started to push J-horror into the American audience, or the Western audience I should say. I feel like its American counterpart does things better. It takes from this film and makes it slightly more digestible, and I found it a lot more tense and dynamic and scary in the American remake. I think that is a better film than this, and that isn't often that happens. This film isn't bad. I did enjoy my time with it quite a lot, and I watched a bunch of special features on the Blu-ray afterwards because I was interested in it, and J-horror is something that I am a fan of. I do really like Asian cinema as a whole, so when there is a horror element to that as well, it's interesting to see where these roots are kind of developed. But for me, it was a bit of a letdown. I couldn't really remember the American remake's narrative that much whilst watching this one, but the narrative in this film isn't particularly strong. The acting's okay, you know, the direction's okay, but it feels like a fairly static film, and I felt it had more scope to kind of achieve, and it could have been a lot better, so it's okay. I might rewatch it at some point in the future, and I will definitely check out the sequels, which I also own as well, because there are opportunities for them to be slightly better or scarier or more tense. But yeah, I'm looking forward to checking those out, and I'm not annoyed that I've checked it out. So yeah, that's The Ring, or Ringu. Next up is a film that a lot of people really liked, and I didn't think was that good at all, and this is Jordan Peele's film called Us. I saw Get Out as well earlier in last year, I think it was, and I quite enjoyed Get Out. It was a really fun take on the horror genre. It was a film which had an interesting twist, and obviously the social commentary within that film was very good and poignant for the time it was made. I feel that because of the success of Get Out and the way that the social commentary within that film was so lauded and praised by pretty much everyone, I think it worked really well as well. I kind of feel like Peele felt like he had to then go on to make another film with a poignant social, political message, and within this film it just completely fails. The film's all over the place. It doesn't know what it wants to be at all, and I feel it's kind of a shame, because there are things within this film which are really enjoyable and really well directed, really well made, and different sequences where you can tell actors are doing terrifically. The main problem that I have with the film is that the twist is revealed in the first 10 minutes of the film, and then alongside that twist there's this whole bullshit narrative behind things going on which feels completely out of place. It comes completely left field. Things don't make sense, characters within the film do different things, and actions don't work consistently within the rule set that the film makes for them. I feel that the performances in the film are really good. I think it's really well directed. The cinematography can work good, but I did feel some of the kind of music choices in the film weren't particularly great. This is something that I kind of struggle with, because Jordan Peele's obviously a comedian. He's an actor, he does the sketch shows and stuff like that, but when the hits in the films are like punchlines with music cues, it feels like he's trying to be clever with it. It feels like he's trying to do something like a Scorsese or a Tarantino, but just doesn't hit the nail on the head. And there are a couple of moments in this film which were eye-rolling. And yeah, now I'm just sitting here in awkwardness because this hasn't worked. And I saw it in the cinema as well, so there was like a whole cinema of people not laughing at the punchlines to these kind of jokes, which makes it really awkward. And I don't know whether this is British sensibility coming through, and whether it worked in an American audience, but especially from my perspective, it didn't work for me a lot of the time. And the more I felt about this film and thought about it, the more I really didn't care for it at all. I've put it down as a 1.5 star, and mainly because this could have been so much better than it was. I was looking forward to the film. I thought it could have been very interesting. It just doesn't know what it wants to be. And Peele's too restricted and forced himself into a place where he feels like he needs to preach about specific problems in America. And I would probably never watch the film again. Hopefully his next film, I don't know what it is as good as Get Out, because that was really fun. Next up, a horror film called Hush. I checked this out on Netflix. I watched it with someone, and it was an enjoyable kind of horror thriller film about a deaf woman in a house who's being stalked by a killer in a mask. And it's pretty good. You know, it's not a bad film. It's a fairly predictable horror affair, and you know, the main crux of this is that she's deaf, so you can see the killer behind her and she doesn't see it, and he can make noises and break glass and she doesn't realise, and things like that. And it's quite interesting, like that concept's interesting. It's not a bad film, but I didn't think it was anything special either. It's just fine. If you've got an hour or two to kill and you want to watch something that might be a little bit creepy, you could check it out. It's not terrible. Next up, a film called The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. This is directed, of course, by a terrific filmmaker called Billy Wilder, and it's really not very good at all. I didn't like this film much in any regard, and it misses the mark on pretty much everything it tries to be. When I started to watch this, I wasn't aware that it was going to try and be a comedy, so I went in with completely the wrong mindset, and it kind of didn't click with me at all. The performances in this are very campy and they're a bit all over the place. I feel a bit weird because Billy Wilder's a very good filmmaker. The Apartment is incredible. It's one of the best films of that era. It feels a bit of a shame that a filmmaker that good is making a very goofy film about Sherlock Holmes, which results in someone in a fake submarine pretending to be the Loch Ness Monster. That's pretty much all you need to know. It's really not good and I do not recommend it at all. So I'll move on.
When I said drop this case, it was not merely a suggestion.
Here we from Loch Ness.
Holmes, I swear to you, I saw it as clear as anything.
Watson, are you quiet, sir?
Next up, a film called Baby Driver, and this, of course, is the Edgar Wright film 2017. Controversial opinion this, but I'm not a huge fan of Edgar Wright's films. I think Hot Fuzz is really fun, and I really enjoyed it. I'd never really liked Shaun of the Dead that much, and I was more of a fan of World's End than Shaun of the Dead, so that kind of gives you some perspective on how I feel about those films. I felt that this film was just one of the most okay films I've ever seen. Nothing in the film took me out and made me think, wow, this is really good. There are a couple of chase sequences in the film which are cool, but the whole film has been planned around the soundtrack. And the soundtrack is interesting. You know, the main character listens to music while he's driving, and the cues that he has when he's listening are the cues that he does in the car. He's like turning around and drifting around corners and all that kind of shit. But the main character in this film is almost completely unlikable. The main actor, I forgot his name, it'll be on the screen somewhere, but his performance is so flat and cardboard and just completely boring that I didn't care for him at all. The people in this film are cliche comic book versions of these kind of character archetypes, and they're never anything more than that. When people die or get killed or things happen to them, I didn't care. There's nothing in the film that makes me feel like I should care for these people, especially towards the end of it when the main character does something to his love interest. Not does something, but something happens with his love interest, which is very obviously going to happen, and he just kind of lets it happen, and oh, the narrative is now forcing this bit of tension because the film's ending and this needs to be tense. I also felt like the kind of crutch of the soundtrack thing was more distracting than it was good within the film. Towards the start of the film, there is a sequence where all of the words of the song that he's listening to appear within the environment that he's living. So words will appear on a lamppost as he walks past a lamppost, or on a coffee cup as he's picking it up, or on a car as it goes by on the taxi. And instead of me thinking, oh, that's really inventive and clever, I just ended up being distracted by it. I'm like, okay, it's clever that you've done this, but I don't care. I don't understand why you've done it, other than to be clever about it, like, oh, I've done the thing. This is a thing that I've done. Look how good this is. It kind of works, but really it's just there. But this is another film that I will not be going back to watch at all. And yeah, it was really disappointing, I'm afraid.
No! Baby, you tell me who does.
She a good girl? You love her?
Yes, I do.
That's too bad.
I'm trying desperately whilst looking at this list to see if any improvements go along, because over the past couple of films I've just mentioned, I was really not a fan of many of them. And we're moving on to X-Men Apocalypse. Yeah, this is bad. So next is an Indian film directed by Rohit Shetty, and this is a film called Chennai Express. My familiarity with Indian filmmaking is very, very limited. I'm going to be the first one to admit that I have not seen many Indian films whatsoever, especially this genre. This feels like, I don't know whether this is Bollywood, because I'm so ignorant of this kind of filmmaking that I don't want to class it as something that it isn't. But this is kind of like a love story between a man who falls in love with a woman that he can't be with because of her family. It's a bit like a Romeo and Juliet kind of story, and it takes place across them traveling across India, and then everything in the end is well all right, and it's one of those things that's really predictable. But I found it really quite enjoyable. It's my first kind of delve into this genre, and I didn't really have a problem with it. The things that took me out of the film were things that felt like they belonged within the genre. So for an Indian audience, the things that were happening that I was finding distracting probably wouldn't be as distracting. You know, like the crash zooms and the kind of laugh tracks and the looking into camera and kind of jeering and laughing at the audience. It feels like a film which is very, very self-aware, and that kind of felt to me like it was part of the whole genre of that kind of filmmaking and that kind of stuff. But I did enjoy my time with it, and I'll probably be dipping a little bit further into Indian filmmaking in the future. But like I said, I don't really have that much of a knowledge of this kind of work, so I don't want to say anything and then be incorrect about kind of issues that I had with the filmmaking side of things, if that's something that this is how these films are made for the audience it is. But yeah, I had fun with it. It's not bad. Next up, a slasher film called The Burning. It's a film about teenagers who are at a late kind of summer camp, and the caretaker of the camp goes on a murderous killing spree, and it's very much a 1980s slasher film. It knows exactly what it's trying to be, and it works fairly well. Some of the gore effects in this film are really, really fun and really well executed. I mean, if you pardon the pun, but yeah, I enjoyed my time with it. It's not an amazing film, but it's one that I'd probably go back and watch again because I had quite a lot of fun with it. Obviously, from a filmmaking perspective, there are problems, but it's a horror slasher film, so I mean, you're not really expecting the best filmmaking ever. It's just not bad, and I quite enjoyed my time with it, so I'll probably go back to it, and yeah, it's fun.
The Burning.
Next up, we've got another Danish film on the list, and this is a film called Nightwatch. I believe there are a couple of films called Nightwatch, but this is the one that stars Nikolai Coster-Waldau, and it's about him working as a security guard at a mortuary near a hospital. One night, one of the bodies that he goes and checks up on isn't there anymore, and it's kind of like a not murder mystery, but it's very thrilling, and I feel like it does what it needs to do to be engaging and interesting, and it's quite creepy and chilling at some points as well. I feel that some of the pacing isn't terrific, the acting in the film isn't bad. Some of the inconsistencies within the filmmaking kind of stood out to me, and it's not a bad film, but it's not amazing. I enjoyed my time with it, but I probably never have to watch it again. But it was quite a fun, creepy little film.
Nattevagten kommer her I biografen.
Next up, we actually have a film that was released this year, and it's a film that I really enjoyed as well, so it's nice to be able to talk about a film that I liked after talking about several films that I thought were just mediocre or okay. And this is Ari Aster's Midsommar, and I really, really enjoyed this film. I thought it was a very, very good psychological thriller. I didn't find it too horrific. I know a lot of people were like, oh my god, have you seen the fucked up shit that happens in this film? But truthfully, I didn't find it that messed up. That's not a reflection on me thinking these things aren't messed up, but one of the key sequences in the film that a lot of people thought was very gory and graphic was a sequence that surrounded a kind of folklore element in the culture of, I think it's Iceland or Sweden. Something happens, and I already knew about the tradition or the kind of the history or past of that. So but when this thing was going to happen, I knew what was going to happen. So when it happened, I wasn't horrified. It was just more of like, well, yeah, I knew that was going to happen, but everyone around me in the cinema is kind of shocked and appalled by what they're seeing, but I've already seen it. And I knew it was going to happen, so there's that. But it's a really, really well-made film. I'd say it was fairly well acted. The main character in this film, I think her name's Florence Pugh, she's really good in it, and you get behind her entirely. The film is about her and a relationship that she's having with her boyfriend, as he's trying to break up with her but doesn't really know how to do it, and she doesn't really want to go to Sweden but gets indoctrinated within this kind of culture and cult-like religion when she's over there. And it's just one of those kind of terrific, moving little modern-day kind of classic horror films, and it does pretty much everything right. You know, there's just the right amount of weirdness in there. There's just the right amount of kind of gore and horribleness, and it's all set during the day as well. It's one of those films. You don't really see many horror films set within a day, and part of that aesthetic really kind of jars you as well. The film is really beautifully shot, really well directed, really well acted, and I really liked the narrative towards the ending as well. So I'd highly recommend watching it. And that being said as well, I didn't really like Hereditary that much. I think this is a much better film than Hereditary. I feel it's more narratively consistent, especially with the events that happen and the kind of horror and drive as the film climaxes. This makes a lot more sense. The stuff in Hereditary that happens towards the end of that film that a lot of people didn't like, I really liked, but I didn't feel that the rest of the film related to that as much, so I didn't like that film in its entirety. I feel this is a lot more cohesive, and I really enjoyed my time with it, and I'm looking forward to checking out whatever Ari Aster's making next, because I really enjoyed it. Next up, I saw one of the worst superhero films I've ever seen, and this was Venom. It's really shit. Don't watch it. After Venom, I checked out a film called A Ghost Story, which was a 2017 film, very, very slow-paced, moody film about a ghost. One of the characters dies early in the film, and he then takes over the presence of this ghost who exists within multiple timelines and different environments and families and interacts with different people. And it's a very interesting, slow build, reflective journey on what kind of happens in the afterlife and what it is to be human and how things are affected after you're not there anymore. How much do you have an impact on the people around you? And it sounds a bit wanky, but it does it really, really well. It's a very gentle film. It's very slow though. You have to go into the film knowing that it's going to be slow. And I quite like slow movies. I know I have talked about other films within this list not having good pacing, but there's a difference between a slow film and a film which is paced poorly. The difference there is when you know that the film is intended to be slow. That's something that I can really admire. The soundtrack's great, the acting is really good. The main character is just a walking bedsheet, but the way it's stylized and the way it's put together and all these kind of things that are just happening over and over again, and it's just a beautiful film, and I really enjoyed my time with it. I watched it in an environment full of people that weren't particularly happy that we chose to watch the film, so it did take me out of it a little bit, but I did really enjoy my time with it, and it's a film that I think I can see myself revisiting this in another 10 years and kind of sitting down and with a glass of whiskey or something and just kind of appreciating again. I've really enjoyed it. I'd really recommend it to anyone who's a fan of kind of like slow building, atmospheric films. I enjoyed my time quite a lot with it. Next up, I watched the classic film called Gilda, starring Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford and George McCready, and I'm reading names off a list here on my tablet. Really, really good film. Obviously, this is a classic. It's a 1946 film. It is dated. You go into these films knowing that they're dated, but the performances in this are absolutely great. The narrative is quite engaging as well, and of course, in the middle, you have this beautiful set piece of Rita Hayworth dancing and singing around a stage, and it's one of those moments. I'm watching it now from this perspective in 2019, and it's just like you can tell it's just one of those cinematic moments that kind of defined that part of cinematic history. It's a really good film. It's a good example of how good films could be back in the day as well. It holds up as a classic, and it makes sense that it is a classic, and yeah, I thought it was really fun. I'm going to go back and watch it at some point in the future, but I'm really glad that I've watched it.
Now they all know what I am. And that should make you happy, Johnny. It's no use just you knowing it, Johnny. Now they all know that the mighty Johnny Farrow got taken, and that he married
The next film I'm going to talk about is a film by Brian De Palma. He's a filmmaker I've kind of discovered a little bit more over the past year or so. I've been picking up his releases on the Arrow Videos lineup, and I've been really enjoying working my way through them. But I think he's an interesting filmmaker. He's definitely one of the kind of American filmmakers of the 1980s and 70s and late 90s or whatever, when he kind of came to fruition with the rest of the movie brats. And you can really tell how stylized he is in comparison to a lot of the other American movie brats. Scorsese's films feel very Scorsese, but De Palma feels very, very much in tune with what he likes to make, and his style of directing is very, very noticeable. I pretty much always enjoy watching his films. You know, they're not necessarily very deep or incredibly good, but they're always very enjoyable films, and he does something with his filmmaking which I really admire. You know, they're entertaining to watch, not only as an audience, but as a fellow filmmaker and someone who's interested in the medium. The techniques that he uses, the split screen, the long takes, the kind of shots, close-up shots that he uses and introduces within these films, they're really interesting. It's a bit, sorry, I'm kind of waffling about Brian De Palma right now, but Raising Cain, I really enjoyed. I thought it was a very interesting film. I didn't know anything about it before going into watching it, and actually following watching it, I watched a bunch of the special features on the Blu-ray because I enjoyed it so much. This is a film starring John Lithgow, and he plays someone again with multiple personality disorder, and this is about a man who kidnaps a child. The whole film kind of happens from his perspective, which is really interesting, and the way that De Palma directs these different kind of personalities is very interesting. You see maybe 3 or 4 of them, but you're closely following him playing 2 different people within the film, I think, because he's got a really bad side of him and a really good side of him, and those are the 2 that are kind of conflicting the most. Lithgow has a really good performance, and a lot of the film is very enjoyable, really well paced, it kind of flows nicely, and the ending's really fun as well. De Palma's someone as well who obviously loves Hitchcock, so you can see that coming through in a lot of his films, and a lot of sequences within his work are copies, or not copies, but inspired heavily by Alfred Hitchcock. But this film's very good, I really enjoyed it. It's weird having seen this in comparison to Split, which I talked about earlier in this video. Yeah, this is way better than Split ever possibly could be. I really enjoyed my time with this, and I'll definitely go back and watch it again in the future when I'm doing more of a Brian De Palma kind of retrospective or something like that.
Meet my child.
What do you think?
I think...
Hickory dickory dock. Cain has picked his lock.
Next up, a film which has come out relatively recently. It had a release in America at the end of 2019, so there we go, but it came out in 2018 in the UK, and I saw it as part of a random one-night screening release last year as well at the cinema. And this is In Fabric by Peter Strickland. Strickland's a filmmaker that I feel really mixed about. His first mainstream film that I can remember is called Barbarian Sound Studio, and when I was a filmmaking student studying filmmaking, obviously, I made a film basically about the kind of craft of filmmaking. Barbarian Sound Studio's narrative echoed my film's narrative that I made, but I hadn't seen Barbarian Sound Studio before I made it, and then watched it and then felt like he'd copied me, kind of thing. Strickland's a very good filmmaker, but he does rely on things quite a lot. He's very repetitive in his nature. His edits are very repetitive. Some of his shot choices also feel very, very repetitive. His second film, The Duke of Burgundy, is one that I very much enjoyed. I think it's one of the best films that came out that year. I got to see that in the cinema. That's a terrific film about 2 characters who are part of a kind of S&M relationship. In Fabric was a film that I was really looking forward to, and it's a film about a killer dress. And this is something that I'm not completely certain about Strickland's direction, because he can create something very moving, very unique, and very well directed, like The Duke of Burgundy, really well shot, takes itself very seriously, and it's absolutely beautiful and gorgeous in tone. And then he can do something like In Fabric, where he starts to have these moments of very personal kind of drama, and I'm there with the characters, really enjoying it. And then he'll just flip it and do something very, very 1960s, 70s Italian slasher filmy, and it just kind of took me out of the film massively. The film is about a killer dress. It's just not a well-constructed film. It feels like the meshes that he's putting together are ideas he's just having, and it doesn't really gel very well. But it's not a particularly well put together film. The narrative revolves around a character who buys a dress and then becomes kind of influenced by the dress and attacked by it, and it then becomes haunted by it. And then halfway through the film, the narrative just changes and we have to then follow another character. And it feels like it's part of kind of like an anthology horror film surrounding this dress, but it really wasn't thought through enough. There are characters that kind of hop up in both versions of the film's narratives, but they don't really work together, and it just doesn't hold together at all for me. I felt like it was an attempt at doing something special, and it failed at nearly every single hurdle. Not to say that there aren't sequences within the film which are terrific. Parts of this film are very well directed, acted, shot, edited, but then other parts, it just fell apart. And I'm talking quite a lot about this, but I was quite annoyed by how much potential the film had with how much it actually ended up being. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Strickland does next, because I'll always check out his work because he's an interesting filmmaker, and I think that people like him are important within the landscape of cinema. But this was a film that didn't really resonate very well with me, and I probably won't be watching it again, which is a disappointment because I really, really love The Duke of Burgundy. The last film I'm going to talk about in this video is going to be Robert Altman's Images. Altman is a filmmaker that I've tried to explore a little bit more recently, and it's obvious he's a very good filmmaker. There are parts in this film which are terrific, and I think the main character, played by Susanna York, is fantastic. It's a film about someone who's a schizophrenic, and she's going through this house in the country with her husband, and there are horrific kind of apparitions appearing all over the place, and you can't tell whether what she's seeing is true or what she's seeing isn't real. And that's part of the whole point of the film, is this kind of claustrophobic involvement and feeling of her being trapped within an environment she can't control or really understand what she's seeing or what's happening to her. It's a really, really well made film, beautifully shot, well acted, well directed. It's one that I'll definitely check out again at some point. I'd really recommend it to anyone interested in filmmaking, especially. It's very arty though, it's an art film. The pacing is quite slow, but it feels like it's meant to be slow, so that's not really that much of an issue. I'd really recommend checking it out. It was a really fun film, and it wasn't really what I was expecting. The only other film that I'd seen from Altman was The Long Goodbye, and I thought that was a really interesting film as well, but this one kind of I felt connected with me a lot more, and I really enjoyed it. So thanks for watching part one of this. Part two will probably come out in another week or so, because this has taken way longer than I imagined, and it's going to take a lot of time to edit as well, because I've just recorded over an hour of footage to talk about these films. If you've got any recommendations or comments on the films that I've discussed, or would like more of a breakdown of particular films within the list, please let me know. I will be trying to do more content on the channel. I know I keep saying that, but it's just I had quite a lot of issues over the past 2 months. They've been very chaotic for me, so I'm kind of back now, and yeah, I'll see you for part two whenever that gets released. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.